Hello there, Josh Cohen.
Hey, Glenn, how have you been?
Been all right, thanks. This is Josh Cohen of Stanford University and Apple University.
Apple University.
Joining Glenn Loury on The Glenn Show. Josh, good to be talking with you again. It's been a couple of months, I think, since we had a chat.
Yeah, I can't remember when the last one was. Probably maybe about 2 months ago,
Yeah.
something like that. I think it was. Anyway, yeah, just always. Also, I just on the bio Boston Review also.
Oh, yes, I forgot Boston Review.
Yeah, which you are also affiliated with.
I
so,
am
yeah.
minor contributor at Boston Review, but it's an amazing institution, so
Yeah.
we'd want to overlook that. So, Josh, here we are. It's, what is it, 11 days, 12 days? 13 days until the election.
13 days. 13 days.
It's
yeah.
been a long campaign, and we're going to sort of review the bidding here and see where we think the race stands, who we think ought to. You're going to issue an endorsement, I take it.
Right. It'll be a real shocker, too.
No one's ready for this.
Yeah. We're gonna let that other shoe drop, and
the debates, which are all history now, the third debate.
What do you think of those debates? What do you think of those?
Well, I thought that, as everybody thought, the president performed very poorly in the first debate, and it really changed the complete character of the race. I mean, it's astounding. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Romney was apparently sliding off into, John McCain territory, and suddenly the tables turned and everything started going in the other direction. And it would appear the momentum persisted, even though the president performed much better in the second and in the third debates.
Yeah.
And then there was the vice presidential debate, about which a lot already has been said. Who won the debate. So Romney clearly bested the president in the first one, and the president, I think, clearly bested Governor Romney in the second one, although, some people say not. And in the third one, the president looked very tough, very strong. He was in command. Governor Romney looked tentative. He was clearly on not his firmest ground. That there are arguments about the president's strategy in the third debate, about whether or not he was disrespectful to Governor Romney and so on. It did appear to me, as some commentators have observed, that if you were to just have no knowledge of who was the incumbent and who was the challenger, you might have thought that it was Obama challenging in that third debate because he was on the attack constantly, as if he had to do something there. And I gather that because the race is tight and so people felt that he did have to, and Romney was playing it relatively safe in that third debate. But all the debates are in. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think, I first of all, on the issue about disrespect, boy, oh boy, does that one not move me. I mean, the most arguably disrespectful moment was the horses and bayonets comment. And, frankly, Romney deserved it. I mean, look, there are two possibilities. Either Romney doesn't know better. Either he thinks that, you can count the number of votes and that tells you something about whether or not you have the right level of military capacity. And if he thinks that, that sort of, shows that he doesn't understand. Or he was being he does understand, which I think is more likely, and he was just being manipulative.
Oh, that would be a new thing in a presidential debate, right?
Well, it wouldn't be a new thing, but this one, he's making a case. I mean, let's take this issue seriously for a second. He's making a case that we, the country, should be spending a lot more money on the military. And his argument is, this is his argument, beginning and end. Look at the force structure. Look at the number of boats and look at the number of planes, and they're down at low levels. QED. We should be spending more money. And it's completely ridiculous. Now, it's a distortion of a pretty serious issue to say we should be spending that much more money, and that's the best that you've got to say for it. And I should, I think, by the way, it's an interesting fact that though he was, I think, slapped around, the Romney was slapped around on that one, unlike other cases where he got pushed back hard, he had nothing to say in response. He just let that one go. So, it was, I think it was deserved.
Okay.
But I understand that it may not, people may have taken it as a, disparaging and inappropriate insult, but I thought it was an appropriate insult myself.
Well, I just want to note that I don't disagree with the substance of the point that you're making, which is that it's a silly argument to say the president is under supportive of defense spending because counting the number of ships in the Navy, that number comes out smaller than it might have come out at some point 70, 80, or 100 years ago. The relevant question is what are the responsibilities of a Navy in the contemporary global situation, and what are the forces required to discharge those responsibilities? And so one should be talking about that. They seem to agree about the fact that the responsibilities are that we're going to have a battleship carrier group or whatever it is in every ocean, that we're going to remain the dominant military force on the planet, that if the Chinese decide that they should have more to say about what goes on in the Western Pacific than we do, that we're not going to accept that. Right. And it seems to me that those are the kinds of things that might have been worth arguing about in a presidential debate.
There were lots of topics, there were a lot of topics that were overlooked. And it is also true that I think the reason that, Obama went very early on the attack in the third debate was that it was kind of predictable, and actually predicted, lots of people predicted that Romney was going to try to line himself up right next to Obama, not distinguish himself from Obama in the foreign policy debate, and in order to make himself, look presidential and not extreme, and then indirectly to keep the focus on the issues about the domestic economy. And, which has sort of been, part of an important part of his strategy all along, and in other areas. But it required him significantly changing the tone and thrust of his views on foreign policy. I don't think that he was channeling John Bolton, his foreign policy advisor, John Bolton, when he was in that third debate. And so I think Obama could have taken the strategy of saying, "Oh, it's really nice that you agree with me," and but I don't think that would have been very effective, and I also don't think it would have been the right thing to do from the point of view of exposing and exploring their real differences. I mean, Romney has been, very much, as very much more of a sharp critic, particularly on issues about Iran, but on other issues as well.
Libya, that didn't come up at
Libya,
all.
He backed off on Libya. He, they were
Syria,
singing a
he basically agreed
singing
about
a duet
Syria.
on Syria. There's a very funny Jon Stewart segment on where they are. He has them each saying, taking turns saying things, and they're saying exactly the same things on Syria. So the differences were very slight. But I don't think the differences, in taking seriously what Romney has been saying all along, which is, I think, what you have to do, especially in view of who his foreign policy advisors are, I think the differences are, much more significant. And it was whether to go into the attack mode was the right thing to do. That's whatever.
So
but I think
hold on. How are
it was important to distinguish.
Let me just ask you, Josh. How are the difference is significant. Romney hugged the president in the debate and didn't allow that much daylight between them when they were talking about foreign policy. But your guess is that were he to become president, America's posture vis-a-vis the rest of the world would be different. That's what I thought I heard you say, and I wonder if you just spell out how you think that would be.
Well, I think he's been much more. Let me first make a sort of 30,000-foot point and then be a little more specific. So at 30,000 feet, and I think this is an important thing in deciding who to vote for, 30,000 feet, you ask yourself, who is more likely to get the country into, a war of choice like Iraq? And I think that gives a pretty strong case that that Romney is more likely. I mean, he's endorsed the Iraq war, thought it was the right thing to do. His advisors like Dan Senor and John Bolton certainly embrace that war and a more belligerent neoconservative outlook on foreign policy. So I think.
So you're talking about Iran, because what other wars of choice?
Particularly Iran. I mean, who knows what might happen someplace else?
Yeah.
Who knows? But yeah, I think particularly in Iran, and that's certainly what Romney has been saying all along. He's been talking about adopting a much more belligerent form of pressure on Iran, and I think it's the kind of thing that doesn't keep a coalition
can I just
together, and it yeah.
I just want to draw out the implication. I mean, the implication is that if Israel were to come to the conclusion that it could not any longer wait to take military action against Iran, it is more likely that Obama would react to that in a way that would try to stop the Israelis from doing something than that Mitt Romney would. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems to me that that's a most likely way in which a war with Iran might get going. And it has the road to bombing Tehran leads through Jerusalem, it seems to me. So tell me if I'm inaccurate about that in your view, or if you agree with me, then is that your judgment that Romney and Obama would react very differently vis-a-vis U.S.-Israeli relations in the event that the crisis actually reaches a critical point?
Yeah, I think they would react differently, and I also think it's more likely that a Romney administration would say that the Israelis, don't you do this, we'll do it. If they were convinced that, if they thought, look, the Israelis are going to do this, so they would say, don't you do this, we'll do this. I think that is more likely, and that's kind of what they've been saying.
What about Nixon goes to China?
Take their word seriously.
What about the Nixon goes to China argument? This is an argument that a President Romney, and I'm not making it. I'm not advancing it sincerely. I'm just putting it on the table as devil's advocate. Would have a kind of credibility that would allow him to say no to the Israelis in a way that could make it stick with the U.S. Congress in such a way that a President Obama would not. He's Nixon going to China. He could be Nixon going to China on this.
I suppose that's a logical possibility, but I don't think he has shown any inclination to say no to the Israelis about anything. And if anything, I mean, the fundraising trip that he did to Israel suggests otherwise. And I don't think the people who he hangs around with have a predisposition to, secretly be saying no to the Israelis and then, being in a position to make a deal. So logically possible, I guess so, but I don't. It doesn't feel very real to me.
Okay.
That's.
Can we go back to the debate for a minute? Because you said that you thought the president, where he was contemptuous of Romney, was justified because Romney was making silly arguments, and you gave an example with which I agree. But I just want to observe that I thought the contemptuousness and dismissiveness and derisiveness of the president's demeanor in response to Romney was more than just rightly rebutting some silly things that Romney said. It looked to me like it was a strategy coming in. I mean, the glaring, you know. Yeah. I mean, I was struck by it. He was like sharp like a hawk, staring across the table at him. He turned to the moderator, and then he turned back to Romney. He turned to, you know, as if to say, "Can you believe this guy is saying this?" You know, like that.
I agree with you.
And that looked like a strategy.
He was leaning in. He was leaning in.
Yeah.
I mean, he was kind of leaning in a little bit. You know, he was. And yes.
A strategy meant to underscore the fact that for the last 4 years, Obama has been commander-in-chief with the awesome responsibility of making decisions, of coordinating administrative action, of speaking to the nation, of comforting the grieving families. And this joker has been running for president for the last 4 years and hasn't done a darn thing. I mean, that's the message that I got out of this. Come on, I'm a serious guy, and this is someone who doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yes, I think that's right, and I think it had a particular force because of Romney's, Romneyism. That is, I think what the thrust of what Obama was saying was that in the area of foreign policy, this is a place where the kind of
election,
saying different things every day, constantly pivoting, is particularly unacceptable, and it just means you're not really in the game. You don't understand what's going on here, and I think I think the charge stuck some, because I think this was a total. The performance was a total shift in view, and that was clear from the beginning. It was, as I say, it was predicted, and I think almost from the first words that Romney said, it was clear that prediction was looking right. And I think
everybody knows that in the primary campaign, a candidate has to placate and satisfy more extreme elements than the candidate can sensibly appeal to in the general election, and he's going to be moving to the middle. I don't think there's information about a person's character, especially given this Republican Party. If you do something in the general election that shows that you're a lot more sensible than you might have appeared to be when you were competing for the nomination.
Agreed with two qualifications. First, you have to look at who the advisors are. And there is a kind of strong neoconservative strain in the advisors, John Bolton. And then also, this, I think there has been a pattern, including in particular Romney's comments about Libya in the middle of the events, that have suggested a willingness to extend into this area, where lives are immediately at stake, a kind of, shiftiness in policy that, is less dangerous and less worrisome in other areas. All of this said, I mean, just to go back to something you said earlier, Glenn, and I don't want to omit this, lots of people have observed. Anne-Marie Slaughter had a nice piece in the Times Online about America's narcissism. I mean, the vast areas of the world and of policy, foreign policy, that were, didn't even, come in for a moment's attention, were, extraordinary and disturbing. I don't think Obama indicated that he's got a kind of big story to tell about, foreign policy and, what the country should be doing. Though I do think it was interesting that I think more than anticipated, Obama kept on bringing the discussion back to the domestic economy, the need to do nation building at home, and surprisingly, because that, I think is generally agreed not to be the area of his greatest strength, the performance of the domestic economy. But I think the message that was getting sent on the foreign policy, in the foreign policy area, is that, he thinks, war is a last resort, not only because it ends up with a lot of people getting killed, but also because the domestic economy is in terrible shape, and we need to do, not just get people back working again, clearly need to do that, but also need to do some long-term, building of the infrastructure and of education, and the, wars of choice and large increases in the military budget really represent a threat to that. So I think if there was a kind of larger vision of, America's role in the world, to use that pompous phrase, in a foreign policy, it was that we should really be focused, the prize now is the domestic situation, and we should be keeping our eyes focused there, and, go in for a strategy of offshore balancing, stay out of the Middle East as much as we can, spend more time in Asia, et cetera. And but as a general matter, I don't think that there was a crisp and, clear vision, and just nothing, very, very little of global interest that came in for attention. So,
how do you react to this? Now, 4 years ago, Obama was running for president, and Hillary Clinton, during the primary campaign, was saying the guy's not ready for prime time as far as being our commander-in-chief is concerned. He had arguably less experience than John McCain has. I mean, sorry, not John McCain. I meant Mitt Romney. Yeah. And John McCain, who had a long career, not only having served the country and been a war hero, a prisoner of war and all of that, but also as a legislator, Senate Foreign Relations Committee and all of that, for many, many, many years, could well have sneered at the wet behind the ears Obama and said, you got to be kidding me. This guy's going to be managing our national affairs. So is there no irony or maybe even hypocrisy in Obama saying to a man of as extensive accomplishment as Mitt Romney has over the course of his life, in effect, who are you to talk about wanting to run the foreign affairs of this country? I mean, give me a break. You're a chump. I mean, I looked at that and I thought, wow. I mean, I grant you, you've got 4 years experience, and that's not nothing. I credit that you've got 4 years experience, but you can't sneer at this guy. Who are you to sneer at this guy? I thought.
Yeah, I think, yes, I agree. There was something, hypocrisy or something, somewhere in between irony and hypocrisy, but I agree on the point, and of course, Romney couldn't say to Obama, in a debate situation, who are you to be sneering at me? After all, I have more experience than you had. The point is way too complicated.
Right.
It makes Romney look sort of silly.
Exactly.
But that's why I come back to, there were, in terms of sheer experience, Obama didn't have very much, and Romney doesn't have very much, but probably has more than Obama had then. But I think judging, where he's going to go by what he's been saying pretty consistently, and by who's advising him, and also by, I think, Obama didn't have much experience, but it seemed, maybe I'm giving him too much credit in retrospect, some kind of hindsight bias or something, but in retrospect, I think I remember him giving the impression of being somebody who took the weightiness of these foreign policy issues, particularly war and peace issues, seriously. And Romney just doesn't give me that impression. I mean, it's all, another occasion for, shifting around and, saying what seems appropriate at the moment. So, but in terms of sheer experience, absolutely, you're right. Yeah.
Well, what was up with the?
So why do you think? What do you think the case is for Obama? I guess you're going to vote for Obama. I assume you're going to vote for
him. Yeah, I'm going to vote for Obama.
With that level of enthusiasm.
Exactly. No, and that's part of the president's problem. I think a great many people are just can't get that 2008 thing going again, man. We just cannot feel the same way about it. And something tells me that the intensity of opposition to him on the other side is at 2008 kind of levels for the other side. They're going to turn out. They're going to, they want to defeat the president. And those of us who are going to vote for him just can't bring the same. I mean, the case for Obama, I can just tick off the talking points. That the Affordable Care Act is a major extension of the social safety net. He got it through. It was ugly. It was messy, but he got it through. That financial regulation, again, Dodd-Frank is not exactly what my liberal economist friends are telling me we needed to do, but it was better than nothing. He got it through. That he inherited a mess and averted with relatively artful economic policy management the worst that might have happened in 2009 in the aftermath of the financial meltdown. That the stimulus package, while it was too small to get the kind of macroeconomic bump that we needed to turn the recession around, it was the best that he could possibly do. And while it was full of some pork and did become a site for a whole lot of, serving this or that constituency or funding this or that pet project, nevertheless, he got it through. And at the end of the day, we averted the disaster. That he represents a ideology of governance closer to the philosophical positions that I would want to affirm. We are all in this together. The welfare state is not the enemy. The federal government being 24% of GDP instead of 20% of GDP is probably a step in the right direction, given the commitments that we are wanting to make to each other, and that the burdens of paying for this could be more equitably shared within the polity, given the massive increases in inequality that have occurred over the last couple of generations and the flat sort of trend line of status for the middle working class. So I think he's going to be the guy appointing people to the Supreme Court versus Romney being the guy appointing people to the Supreme Court. Right. And given the kinds of things that I think the Supreme Court might do, I prefer that it be Obama being the guy appointing people to the Supreme Court. The Tea Party of 2010 is a dark cloud on the American political horizon. I wouldn't want to see them getting more ammunition, which is, probably what happens. More influence on ultimate outcomes of the federal government if Republicans retain control of the House, heaven forbid, gain control of the Senate, and also take control of the White House. So he's done a decent job. One can make objections here and there. He represents a philosophy of governance that is closer to something that could be justified as decent and appropriate to our time. He would use the discretionary powers of his office in ways that would be more compatible with my own vision for the future of the country. This is all in comparison to the other guy. And he's shown himself after 4 years to be a more than competent person exercising the powers of that office. That's the case as best I can make it, Josh. Sorry, I know that's not going to sell on the campaign trail.
Well, I was going to say exactly the opposite. I said, I was going to say, what more do you want? I think that you should go on the stump. I mean, I do think that this is something we've talked about before, that there were lots of people who had very exaggerated expectations. I know you didn't have them. You were a Hillary Clinton supporter until, in Obama and McCain, you were an Obama supporter, but you had your hesitations about Obama, and I did not regard myself as an Obama Kool-Aid drinker. I was a supporter of Obama in the primaries as well as, of course, in the general election, but I thought that the supporters of Obama were, not helping him by, by having a set of exaggerated expectations about what he was capable of achieving, and also by partly exaggerated because there was an underestimation of the nature, the intensity, and the destructiveness of the Republican opposition. I think my case is about the same, although what I was struck by when you were stating yours was that it was a mix of kind of retrospective voting, so to speak, and prospective. You get rewarded for having done a reasonably decent job, and also you're going to make you'll be better for the future. And my thinking about it is much more focused on the second. Not that I disagree on the retrospective assessment, but I don't quite understand the idea of retrospective voting. But so for example, on the Affordable Care Act, when I think, I take Romney at his word.
That he'll repeal it.
That he will repeal it on day one. Now, as people have said, I think it was Stephen Colbert did a routine about all the things that Romney was going to be doing on day one.
You'll be busy.
You've got a bit busy day one. Right. China, currency, manipulator, Affordable Care Act gone, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, but I think the thing about Obamacare is if Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, gets repealed, then 30 years from now, 40 years from now, when we are, gone and forgotten, we will be having the same argument that we've had in the country for the past 100 years about how shameful it is that there are 40 or 50 million people who have no health insurance, and what are the ways of getting them health insurance. And I think we'll be having it in a worse way than we've had it before, because if you go back 20 years to almost 20 years to the Clinton era debate about health care, the argument there was between, at least rhetorically, was between a Democratic idea about how to extend health insurance to everybody and a Republican idea about how to extend health insurance to everybody. And the Republican idea was something like what the Affordable Care Act turned out to be. But the shared premise was that you needed to get coverage for everybody, and the question was the best way to do it. I think the Republican Party, partly because of that Tea Party influence that you mentioned, has even rhetorically backed off on the idea that it is a basic measure of success in healthcare policy that you've got coverage for everybody. So the idea going forward that what will happen is we'll go back to having this same argument that we've had for 100 years about how to get coverage for everybody just strikes me as a disaster. And that is that's a prediction that I think you can be pretty confident of. I think that it is.
Well, Josh, the people who say repeal and replace are, I think, implicitly endorsing the idea that coverage for everybody is a desirable goal, but that the means that has been legislated are not the best way of doing it. Otherwise, they wouldn't.
I don't
think
that's right.
So, what do they mean by replace?
I don't think that's right. I think what they mean is that you do. This is what they've said. Paul Starr. I learned this point from Paul Starr about the change in the terms of discussion. Mm-hmm. And what they say is that you'll have a bunch of much more piecemeal reforms. Different states will adopt different policies. If a state wants to follow Massachusetts in adopting a Romney care / Obamacare type policy, that's fine. If other states don't want to do that, that's fine.
Okay,
too.
So let me ask you this. Why isn't the president running? I mean, we're in the last 2 weeks of the campaign. I'm hearing the speeches that the president is giving at his rallies and so forth. And he is not saying, you know what, the right idea for this country is that everybody would be covered. These people over here think, he's not talking in these big, programmatic, visionary, here are the basic values. This is what this country is about. Here are the differences between the parties. This is what we stand for. This is what we achieved. He's not underscoring the historic nature of the achievement. Rather, he's talking about Romnesia. He's trotting out these various, I assume, focus group tested micro assaults on the candidate, and he's not putting forward vision. So if indeed it's correct that the other side's opposition to Obamacare reflects the fact that they don't endorse something that I think a vast majority of Americans would affirm as a basic value for our country, why is the president not running on that?
I don't know. This is the mystery of the past 4 years also. I mean, here's a guy, everybody says, people say great speech maker. I'm not sure. I mean, he's made a couple of great speeches, but I'm not sure. Let me just make one related observation and then come back to the question you asked, which I think is a great question. So after the first debate, I thought this is a terrible performance, etc. Let me go look and see, what did Bill Clinton do when he debated Bob Dole in '96? So I watched some stretches of the Clinton-Dole debate, and Clinton was terrific.
Yeah, no doubt.
Dole was being Dole-like, growly pit bull, sort of annoyed, but Clinton was very good. And the thing that really struck me was that Clinton, and Clinton, by the way, was not running on a big vision. He wasn't drawing philosophical differences between the parties. Clinton was running on his record.
Yeah.
And, it's a
record which, by the way, involved a lot of bipartisanship in the achievement of, the Clinton's crime bill, the Welfare Reform Act, all that stuff. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And also, he's running with the bounce after the Republicans closed down the government, and they're kind of looking bad by '96, right. And he's got a little
they're the extremists.
Lightness in his step, but it was it just struck me at that point that look, it's the economy is performing much less well 2012 than it was during the 1996 election, and it's just tough for Obama to get up and say here are all these terrific things that we've done, and you can say it's because financial recessions are deeper and last longer. Rogoff, Reinhardt, than others, and this one was really deep, and the Republicans have been obstructionists. But at the end of the day, you got the fact of unemployment. So it was a striking contrast. So
let me just make sure I got the point, Josh. The president cannot run on his record because things have just been so bad.
It's running on his record requires him saying things, as he said, like consider the counterfactual.
How bad it would have been if we hadn't done what we did.
How bad it would have been. And, it's true.
Yeah.
I think it's true.
Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence that it's true. That's the way we talk in the seminar room. And we believe it. And I don't think it's, a point that's I think everybody can understand it. It's just not a strong, there are no bumper stickers that say, consider the counterfactual. It's not a great political slogan, though it's true. And I think it does have some, probably has some force. The thing about that we've talked about before, not only us, it's one of the great mysteries about Obama is just to crystallize it, this is a guy who has never gotten up and in front of the country with a bunch of flip charts and said, here's where we were, here's how we got into this mess. Here's where we're going. Here's why it's important. It's going to be a rocky road in between, but let's, as Ronald Reagan would say in '82 and '83, let's stay the course. And I don't understand. It's above my pay grade or orthogonal to it or something like that. I don't understand why he hasn't done that, and he didn't do it. He hasn't done it in the in the debates either. But I think
it's a glaring deficiency, Josh. I mean,
it
isn't it not?
is.
Because it's about leading the country, and rather than responding to what it is that a poll might seem to be saying, it's about creating a sentiment or fostering it in the polity, giving people a reason to rethink how they are looking at matters.
I agree with you. I think it is a real deficiency, and I think it's what Bill Clinton is much better at than Barack Obama. And I think the part of the issue is, what Clinton has a gift for doing, and what Obama lacks the gift for doing, is to take the 30,000-foot abstractions or the 50, the high-level abstractions about we're in this together, and then say, look, if you believe that, what I just said, then you should be really concerned about what these guys are trying to do on Medicaid expansion. To be able to take the big abstractions and, draw out the tentacle, point the tentacles that connect the big abstractions to very particular policy choices, so that when, in Clinton's great Democratic convention speech
of 2012,
down there,
the one he just
in
gave.
2012, when he is down there in the policy weeds,
you
don't feel like you're in the policy weeds.
Right.
You feel like you're still up at 30,000 feet talking about very big issues, and the fact is, you are, because that's that is what the abstractions look like when they hit the road. So, this I think is the truth in the criticism of Obama that his opponents make about when they say he's great at making speeches. It's not just the lack of a kind of taste for retail politics. It's that these abstractions about us building it together, and we're all in this together, and responsibility is important, but so is fairness. To connect that to, and so we should do this rather than that. He just doesn't have Clinton, and so it's a hard thing to do it. I don't think he's got Clinton's ability to link those things.
Final
so
thing,
the abstractions just seem abstract.
Yeah, and it's a problem. This is a final thing because I know we're short on time.
Yeah.
The tea leaves point toward a very, very, very close election, and I'm wondering if those of us who support the president have reason to be fearful. I mean, that he might lose. I mean, he could lose this election. I know, we're still ahead. We're barely ahead here. We've got the Electoral College map favoring us, but I've got an awfully bad feeling about this.
Yeah. Well, as I had a really bad feeling 6 months ago, just because of the fundamentals on the economy. I had a very good feeling a month ago, and I'm prepared to adjust my expectations to what, more or less to what Nate Silver says when he takes all the tea leaves and puts them together into a nice brew. And so I'm like, right now I'm about 55-45. Not that I expect Obama to win 55-45, but I'm about 55% that he's going to win. But I think one of the reasons that maybe that you feel that great sense of concern is that it's part of the political strategy of the very smart political strategy of the Republicans to convey a kind of narrative of Romney triumph, and they're on the march, and the Obama people are in retreat, and it may have some that it could have the psychological effect on people of thinking, I like Obama. I think he's the better candidate. I don't love Obama. Things aren't going so well, and you get, small amounts of turnout could make a very big difference. So I'm 45%, maybe 46%, somewhere around there, concerned. But I think more likely than not, Obama is going to win. And I think for the reasons that we've been talking about, I do think it's important that he wins, for the reasons about war and peace, for the reasons about the healthcare stuff, for the reasons about the court, which is really about democracy and basic and reproductive rights and regulation as well. The philosophical reasons you mentioned, the fact that the Republican Party is not equipped at this point to be a governing party. They've disqualified themselves. So I regard it as potentially a disaster if Romney wins it. Anyway, on that happy note.
Well, I just want to say, I want to say on my own account, yeah, I get the 55-45. I guess I'd affirm that if I had to put down probabilities. But I'm focusing on that 45. And, I'm reading the tea leaves, and one of the things that I'm concerned about is the kind of campaign that the president is running itself is telling me that they think that they might lose. I mean, he hasn't pivoted to, saying anything big. He stayed on this, Romney is unacceptable, Romney is unacceptable.
Yeah.
And that feels to me like the strategy of somebody who thinks, there's the whiff of desperation about it. I mean, I couldn't believe here we are in the last 2 weeks of the campaign. The man's been president for 4 years, and he's still using tricks, Romnesia, offshore investment. It just feels to me like somebody has made a calculation. You got to do this, man. You got to do this. This is the only chance you've got.
Well, they've dropped Romnesia now. I think they may be pivoting a little bit, and
I hope so.
And I worry that too many people like you are focused on the 45% because you're under the spell that's being cast by Romney and his party. Anyway. Good to talk.
All right, Josh. Nice talking to you, man.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.